Hey everybody, thank you for coming to this event, and I'm very happy to introduce Katherine Matthews today. She and I met through our relationship with the company Alteryx, which is a business intelligence company that's newly publicly listed. They're like flying up through the ranks in terms of market share for self-service analytics, and she is going to talk about basically how that changes the landscape and skill set for business intelligence analysts, for data scientists, for ETL professionals. And part of what makes Katherine's story so cool is just the background, is just how her career and the development of these self-service tools aligned in a way that allowed her to crush in the business intelligence world. I will let her explain all that to you in beautiful detail, and please give us a round of applause for Katherine.
Thank you, Chris. And thanks everyone for coming out today. This is my first time lecturing a group of college kids and not getting graded on it, so this is kind of exciting. So as Chris mentioned, I am a business intelligence analyst. I currently am working at the National Council of Architectural Registration Boards, which is a regulatory body. So if you want to be an architect, you have to go through us. And I've been there about 5 weeks at this point, so it's still very new and exciting. But what I wanted to talk to you about today is kind of where I come from. So I put this down as story time because it's a Friday at 2 o'clock for the weekend. I figured everyone could use a break from like crushing giant intellectual problems and just hear what it's like out in the real world. So I got started in data, if you will, when I was working at the book center at the University of Maryland. One of the program areas that I was responsible for was the magazine department, which was endlessly fascinating despite being a dying breed of publication. And so I wanted to catalog all of the publications that we had, and I wanted to figure out how they were performing and then decide which magazines we should actually be stocking. I felt like I was coming up with the newest and greatest idea. But I didn't have a computer. I had graph paper. So I drew out a little table and I manually, with pencil and paper, listed out all of the titles that we had for sale, and then I tracked their sales over a little bit of time. So I felt very cool about that one. My next job was working at a hotel where I had Excel, which was thrilling. It was a computer program that could do all of this cool stuff that I'd never even thought of before. I worked in revenue management, so I was working on tracking historical sales data and then forecasting where we should be selling in the market. And then from there, I went to the Entomological Society of America, which, if anybody knows what an entomologist is, you get extra credit. Yeah, bugs, insect scientists. Entomological, yeah. Bugs. So I'm actually deathly afraid of bugs. I have a picture of me freaking out holding a giant spider, which is not an insect, but close enough, if anyone would like to see it afterwards. So I was there, and I was their database manager, and I was all things analytics to everyone in the organization, serving several different departments. And providing support for any type of request that was coming into the organization. And so that was really sort of where I started to hit my stride. But the funny thing is, I got all this way with a French major. I studied at the University of Maryland French. I thought for sure I'd get a job at like Netflix translating subtitles, or in Nice teaching small children English or something like that. But I graduated in 2010, and the reality of the matter was I needed a job. I needed something. And so I didn't know it at the time. I didn't think I liked data. I probably didn't even really understand what data was. But what I did have was a keen ability to communicate in English as well as French. And so that's how I ended up getting the job at the hotel, and that's how I ended up getting the job at the Entomological Society of America. And that's what I want to talk to you guys about today, is about the importance of being able to communicate what you're doing with, whether it's data, statistics, analytics, whatever you're working on. If you can't talk to your audience, you're not going to be able to get very far with what you're working on. And so at the Entomological Society of America, a lot of my focus was on taking in requests, which involves a lot of back and forth. You need to be able to have a conversation with the person about what their business need is, about what they're actually trying to do with the information, about where they're really going. You know, sometimes you get a request that's sort of half there. It's not the whole process. It's just part of the piece, part of the puzzle. And so you have to kind of be able to work with people, have conversations, flesh that out. And then from there, you need to be able to actually solve the problem, which, again, French major, no programming skills, none whatsoever. I thought Excel was cool. I really did. And so that's where the self-service piece comes in. Tools like, as Chris mentioned, Alteryx. I also used Tableau a lot. All of these self-service products that enabled me to use my communication skills to take a data problem and actually solve it for my audience. To be able to ingest a question, go to the data, and figure out what the answer was without actually knowing anything very sophisticated at the end of the day. So, as part of this process, the communication to figure out the initial business need, the hard part, doing it, figuring out what that answer is, what that data set looks like, and then being able to go back to the person and communicate what you found, why you found it, what they can do with it. And from there, it becomes sort of an iterative process. So you're not, in most cases, going to receive a request, process it, put something back out and say, ta-da, I did it. In most cases, there's going to be a lot of back and forth. Someone's going to realize they didn't ask the right question the first time, or they're going to realize now that you've provided this data, they actually have a lot more questions. But it's going to be a continued back and forth. And so those communication skills, again, are coming to play. I'm a little bit of an oddball in the data community, both because I have a French major and because I work in the association space. So a little bit about associations. They are nonprofit organizations. They can be a couple different flavors thereof, but basically they're organizations that serve a mission primarily, and they come in all stripes in terms of revenue. I happen to work for a very small one, where I sort of found this niche was in being able to provide an analytical capacity to an organization that otherwise isn't necessarily going to have one, but also providing a voice to their data. So not just being able to take their data and do something with it, but to be able to talk about it, both to the internal customers, to the external stakeholders, to the membership at large. And so that's sort of where I really sharpened that craft. Some of my biggest moments were presenting data to the board. So, taking something that started off with one simple question and following it through that process all the way to presenting it to the board and saying, here's the state of X for your organization, and being able to have that conversation with them, to take questions, to be able to share the story with them. So after about 4.5 years at the Entomological Society of America, I was not interested in making a move, but people had heard tell of my great and magical powers, I guess. And so several job offers came to me, and I ultimately ended up at the National Council of Architectural Registration Boards. But this time, instead of sort of hodgepodging together my role and just kind of figuring out what I'm doing as I'm going, I have an actual sort of thesis around my work. And basically I'm saying, I am going to come into this organization, and they have some self-service analytics. They have some people with access to data. They have a lot of what you'll find exists out there, shadow databases, where, so-and-so in this department has their own thing that they keep in an Excel sheet that they don't let anybody else see, but they make very important business decisions off of. Those are not your friends. So my mission there is really to bring analytics to the people. And so it's not necessarily my job to build up this huge competency to then wall off the analytics and say, if you want them, you come through me. Ask me a question and I will answer it. Rather, it's my job to support people in their sort of personal data discovery so that they can come in, talk to me, build a relationship with me and with the data, and then go out from there and explore it on their own, and then come back to me as a resource for questions. And I think that's a lot of what you're going to find out there, especially in my space, in the smaller business space, is that there's this huge proliferation of tools where people can actually get at their own stuff. Almost everything comes with an analytics component at this point. You know, whether it's an app you've downloaded on your phone to an email marketing client that you're using organization-wide, it's going to have some sort of baked-in analytical competency. So if you want to really build out yourself as a resource to people, it's not going to be about providing the data or providing the chart or providing something that loads up when you view it that looks really snazzy. It's going to be about having those conversations. It's going to be about helping them through the analytical process and sort of being that sort of shepherd role through the process. It's about having these conversations and building relationships and supporting people as they take advantage of all that's out there, especially, you know, with the increasing presence of AI-based tools in the market. We're going to increasingly see that even the formulation of the question is kind of being outsourced. You know, you don't even have to come up with a good question on your own anymore. The tool is looking at your data and running machine learning algorithms and figuring out what questions you should be asking. So all of that ability to do the heavy lifting that I have somehow shirked my entire career while speaking French very gracefully, all of that ability to do the heavy lifting is absolutely fantastic because it's going to empower you to be able to really get in there and do stuff yourself. But you're going to be working with people who don't have those skills. You're going to be working with people who have French degrees and other liberal arts degrees who are in the weeds, in the data, in the analytics, and just need you as a resource, as a guide for that process. So that's enough pontificating about my life story, which is terribly fascinating. I'm sure you all agree. I don't just work. I also work outside of work. Actually, I'll come back to that one. So one thing that I think is really useful is getting involved in the community. It's kind of what brought me here today. As Chris mentioned, we got to know each other through Alteryx. I'm also involved in the Tableau community. There's also, I'm sure everyone here is already familiar with Kaggle. If you aren't, yeah, I'm seeing nods. And then DataKind as well, which is a way for you to donate your services basically to organizations that wouldn't otherwise be able to have a data scientist on staff or somebody with that statistical competency. But getting involved in the community is a really important piece of developing yourself, developing your skill set, and most importantly, developing your personal brand. Your personal brand is what's going to get you from job to job. You know, your skill set, your resume, all well and good, definitely need to be strong. You're all doing the right things for that. But having a brand around yourself, having an identity that says, you know, I am this person, these are the things I have to offer, these are the things I can do with them, and these are the things that I have done to help people so far, that's going to go a long way. And then I've also got a few resources up here if you want to. So what I did want to highlight two things that I grabbed in here, two articles from the Harvard Business Review talking about the takeover of people like me in the analytics and data science roles. So talking about how you don't necessarily have to have these hardcore programming skills anymore, talking about how being able to have conversations and formulate questions and build relationships is very important, and then also looking at just how the landscape is changing, because at the end of the day, there's a huge need for data science, and people just aren't being generated quickly enough. So it's going to be people falling into it for a while until you know, there's enough trained data scientists out there. There's going to be a lot of people learning it on the job like I did. And then there's a fantastic series from Kaggle from their blog. It's from 2016, but I haven't adjusted to 2018 yet, so in my mind that's still last year. But on communicating data science. So there's an interview with someone talking about the importance of storytelling, that, you know, you're not just going to present a flat chart and say, like, ta-da, this is the number, that you really need to tell the story of what that means in its context. And then there's some pointers on data visualization and that sort of stuff. So I'll go back 2 slides. This is kind of what I wanted to end with. So this is actually the title of Marshall Goldsmith's book. I'm going to be honest, I haven't actually read this book. It sounds fascinating, not quite my speed. But what I really like is just this. What got you here won't get you there. Whatever has brought you to where you are today, whatever has brought you to what you're doing, why you're doing it, you're going to need to iterate in order to get to your next step. So I wanted to leave lots of time for questions because Chris said he stoked the fires a little bit and that there's a few people seated in the front row specifically who might want to grill me. But I have plenty of time to answer questions from anyone and everyone. I'd say hit me with your best shot. I'm not shy.
Okay.
Yeah?
So what would be your response to a question of a lot of the business intelligence, or if it's maybe a nonprofit kind of policy questions that one might ask of a data scientist are related to causal inference? Someone with a strong, or lacking a strong statistical background may not exactly know how to position the analysis in order to get at that causal relationship. How would you respond to that in the sense of using these kind of out-of-the-box data science tools?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And I think probably something I spend at least 50% of my time fighting with people over, especially as you noted with out-of-the-box tools. Where they are now, where the current state of things is, you know, you can run your data through them and they say sort of like, oh my God, everybody who likes mint chocolate chip ice cream is also a member of your organization. Like, these two things probably aren't related unless you're the ice cream society, specifically the mint chocolate chip ice cream society. And so having the ability to navigate a conversation about what's correlation and what's causation and where you can differentiate the two is going to be super important. A lot of times, especially in spaces where you don't have a team of data scientists, you have an analyst, especially in that sort of space, you're going to have people that just really want an answer. Just really want an answer. They just want something. They just want you to tell them, solve X, and you'll make, you know, all your problems go away overnight. I think we all know that that's not really how it works. And so you have to be able to bring that conversation to them to say, yes, there's a relationship here. No, it's not necessarily something that if we control for it, we're going to solve this problem. I think there are other factors at play. I think that we need to look at this or that or the other and sort of develop that analysis further. That's what I would say. Yeah.
So just going off of that, have you found that there are other like general misconceptions people have about data or analytics that kind of contributes to this like widening gap in like statistical literacy?
Yeah, I think there's sort of both sides of the issue are a big issue, big part of this problem. Data quality. So a lot of organizations have a lot of data, but it's not always necessarily very trustworthy. And so sort of paradoxically, both you have to help people to understand where the potential pitfalls in the data are, and you have to also help them understand statistical significance. So like you have to say, okay, yeah, this data is a little bit flawed, but we can kind of account for it here, and we can still run whatever algorithm we need on it and get an answer that we can stand behind, you know. So it's kind of an interesting sort of tightrope to walk, to navigate between like just the sheer volume of data that people have access to and the questions that they want to ask of it, and helping them to have confidence in the answers regardless of the data set's initial quality. It's a great question. Yeah.
I feel like when you're doing self-service analytics, it's a very supporting role.
Yeah.
Meaning, if you do your job very well, the work runs smoothly. So how do you establish your value in that kind of setting?
Yeah, you guys have really good questions. Okay, so it really comes down to relationship building. So one of the things that I've been working on since I'm new in my current position is having listening sessions. So setting aside time with all of the people at the organization, okay, not all of them, there are like 100 people, but the main stakeholders, the main internal customers, and just saying, you know, talk to me about your day-to-day work. Talk to me about where data intersects with that. Talk to me about the places that you feel like you've got really great data and really great analytics, and talk to me about the places where you feel like this is just not working out. And having those conversations gives you tons more information than you can actually use right away, but it gives you sort of a roadmap to build a relationship with that individual. And then as you're building out and developing things to support them in self-service, they're still seeing you as a resource for interpreting those and developing the next steps on your roadmap. So they're like the shepherd sort of idea. Yeah.
So in recent years, we've seen machine learning and AI techniques, on the rise, both in terms of their capabilities and in terms of sort of like a societal hype factor.
Yeah.
But despite that, a lot of sort of bigger corporations and bigger organizations are somewhat hesitant to dive into these sort of newer techniques. So sort of what have your experiences with that, what have those experiences been? And from the perspective of an analyst or a data science practitioner, how might you go about encouraging these bigger organizations to start to explore these techniques?
Yeah, another fantastic question. So I think you're going to run into really quickly the people out there who they say they're data driven, they say they love data. What they're not saying is that they love data that agrees with them. They love data that proves their point. They love it when the data says they're doing a good job. Anything that doesn't fall into that bucket, they don't love so much. And so I think the increasing, the proliferation of these tools is a little scary to those people. Because when you let your analysts loose on a data set, they're probably going to come back with something a little bit on the favorable side, or they're going to approach it very excuse me, but bad news. Whereas a computer program written to just do deep learning through a data set and come back with information is not going to be nice about it. They're going to say, no, your idea was terrible and it caused that project to fail. Hopefully in exactly that syntax. That's where we're going. So it's interesting. I think what we need to do is work on people to accept data in all its forms and in all its conclusions, and encourage people to be okay with the bad news that comes out of data sometimes, and say, just because the data tells you that something is not working out, or it's not doing what it should, or it's failing, doesn't mean the conversation ends there. It means the conversation starts there. And we need to be able to take it and figure out what's going on and figure out what sort of factors we can affect that might change where this is headed. And so I think until there's that cultural shift to seeing a negative result as the beginning of a conversation rather than the end, I think there's going to be continued fear around letting the robots tell us what we're doing wrong. Yeah.
So in a setting with some of these self-service analytics, you put the data in, it runs some maths and gives you an answer out. How do you start those conversations with people about what's actually happening? Is it important that they know what's actually happening? Or do people just kind of generally take what is said as
yeah. So your asking of this question is very timely, because in my previous role, where I was just the single source of anything that needed number crunching, I did kind of play it close to the chest. And I sort of questions came in, answers went out, and I didn't bother people boring them with the details, even though I thought it was really cool and fun. I figured I didn't need to take up their time explaining what I had done. But I'm kind of doing a 180 there, and I'm seeing in my new role where people are going to feel more empowered to take an analytics project on after you're done working with them and keep it going if they understand, if you kind of demystify it. If you say these are all the things that I did, these are all the things that you can now do with it, and this is where it can go from here. So sort of, demystification, I think, is the right answer. And I'm actually thinking about starting a blog, because I work with, not a big blog necessarily, there's plenty of people that have got that market cornered, but an internal blog at the organization that's just saying, here are all the data science projects that we're working on in our department. Here are some of the things that we're doing and how we're doing them, and this is your chance to learn about this mystical land of data science. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. It's an evolving line of thought. Yeah.
You mentioned that communication is very crucial. But
Yeah.
for a lot of us, it's a very innate skill that we haven't had the chance to work on.
Mm-hmm.
How would you say we could improve our communication abilities?
Yeah, so this was a big one for me. Believe it or not, though I'm standing up here today, I'm totally introverted and I'm very shy, and I would love to just sit at my computer all day long and have nobody talk to me. But that doesn't work out so well. It's not a good way to win friends and influence people. So for me, getting out of my shell, learning how to talk to people, was really about getting involved in the community. So instead of like throwing myself into the, shark-infested waters of an industry that I didn't understand, I sort of tiptoed into the kiddie pool of places that made sense to me, that used a familiar language, that were made up of other people like me, where we were all kind of trying to figure out how to talk to people and how to like cross the line and communicate data science to the non-technical people. So getting involved in user groups, doing presentations at conferences when you can, any opportunity to just have to get up there and explain what you do is going to sharpen that skill set. And the more you can like continue to tiptoe in and like start talking to different people, the sharper that skill is going to get. I did a workshop in December at a conference for association professionals where I actually created a fake data set of association data, and I let them all loose with Google Data Cloud and Power BI, and if they wanted the Tableau free trial, but I warned them that they would get a lot of emails following up on that. And so it was interesting. I had a bunch of CIOs sitting in a classroom that I controlled, and I told them what I did and how I did it, and then I gave them a chance to do it themselves. And so it was a way to sort of, again, demystify, but also to practice my ability to communicate not just what I do, but also like in a teaching way to kind of bring someone down that rabbit hole with me. Yeah.
So in like the age of big data, a lot of companies are trying to gather as much data as possible. Do you think like some of the bigger companies like Facebook or Amazon or Google are overstepping their boundaries as far as data collection sometimes?
Ooh, I like this question. So as a data person, I am totally guilty as charged of being a data magpie. Like if you can collect it, I want it and I want to play with it. Then I leave work and I put on my like personal hat and I don't even have a Facebook. So I want all this data, and yet I'm not providing it, so I'm not walking the walk and talking the talk. I think if you're collecting it and you have a legitimate business need and you intend to provide a service with it, I think that's fine. But when you're collecting it just for the sake of collecting it, or if you're collecting it to do something nefarious or to sell it, then you've kind of lost my interest. But it's interesting organizationally, not that I've ever worked for someone the scale of Facebook or Amazon. It's interesting to have these conversations with people where they see what Facebook is collecting or what Amazon is collecting, and they're like, oh, we want data like that. And first of all, no. Second of all, like, what are we going to do with it? I think there has to be a business case for something before you start collecting it. So, you.
So you mentioned storytelling and how it's important to explain the data. So what are some of the ways you go about that? Because I feel like it's really easy to just like look at the numbers and be like, this is what that means.
Right.
How do you make it interesting?
Yeah. So I'll give a good answer and then a kind of a cheating answer. The cheating answer is Tableau actually has a feature for building stories, and so forcing myself to use that has helped me to remember to always tell a story. But the more real answer is, it comes from a lot of failed meetings, from a lot of times that people asked a question, and then I came back and I said, 42. And they were like, okay, great, you can leave now. And I'm like, I had things to say, okay. And so the storytelling piece comes in where you can actually say, talk about how you got there, what you did, and kind of show them some of the insights that came along the way. They asked you to figure out this one number at the end of a pipeline, but what did you find along the way? What other pieces were there? And if you found 42 at the end of the road, what do you see maybe coming as a follow-up question? Or what do you see down the road further from that question? So it is kind of a skill that you have to force yourself into, because it's very easy to just answer a question and move on. But if you really want to build a relationship and start a conversation, figuring out what story got you there and what story will get you to the next place makes a big difference. Oh, I think she was first.
So I feel like a lot of people feel like data or analytics is an individual task because it's hard for multiple people to look at the same data set, work on the same thing. So
yeah.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about the collaborative aspects that you found in your work experiences or non-professional experiences as well.
Yeah, that's a good question. So because you're very right. It is kind of a very individual thing. You don't want somebody else working on the same stuff, because what if you come up with a different answer? I don't know what to do with that. So it's kind of another thing you have to sort of teach yourself into. For me, that experience really came about sort of butting heads with people that were not interested in waiting for me to answer their questions. And so they were like just hack and slashing their way to an answer. And I was sort of diligently going the right way to figure out what the answer to the question was. And every now and then we didn't arrive at the same answer. And so that's where the friendliness aspect comes into play, and you have to say like, okay, why don't we work together on this? Why don't we talk about why you want to do it that way and why I want to do it this way, and let's figure out what the compromise is. Because at the end of the day, we both want whatever is best for the business, but we need to figure out how to come up with a unified truth at the end of the process.
So as I'm sure you know, the gender diversity within STEM and data science is pretty skewed. So I was wondering what challenges you may have encountered as a result of that and how you've overcome them.
Yeah, that's a good question, especially in the current environment. So I have to be honest and say I haven't had too hard of a path. I've been pretty fortunate in my roles, but at the same time, I'm very involved in the like women in tech community. I live closer up to DC, and so I participate in a number of meetups and groups around that. It is really challenging. The tech space is male-dominated in general, and the association space is no different. And then even, you know, as you kind of winnow up the ranks, it just becomes less and less and less females. I think the best thing, and this is my unprofessional opinion, this is, you know, an opinion of one, everybody I think approaches it differently, but for me, my approach has been to just constantly communicate myself and brand, which sounds a little inauthentic in this context, but to just have a me and stand up for me and say, this is what I do, I'm very good at it, which is very hard to say, but you learn how to say that. You know, I'm very good at it and I'm very confident in it, and this is where I want to go with it, and I don't care who gets in my way, you know, I'm going to get there. And eventually people just kind of learn to respect that. But like I said, I haven't really met anybody who's really tried to stand in my way yet. I'd probably just like, no, kidding, I wouldn't. But yeah, no, I think that's a great question. I think it's something that everyone kind of goes through on their way. Yeah.
This is kind of two-pronged.
Okay, prong number one.
So, in like getting into self-service data analytics and using these tools, for someone who either doesn't have a statistics background, how do they kind of navigate that foreign landscape? And then the second point or angle is for someone who's like used to coding up their algorithms and kind of just like changing every nuance, how do you then go in and kind of limit yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question too. So prong number one, people will just smash data into anything and then listen to whatever comes out the other side. So it kind of, we've touched on this a few times, like how you have to kind of be careful and kind of talk people off that cliff of like, well, yeah, I know you ran that decision tree model and you felt very proud of yourself, but you didn't really get anything real out of it. So being able to communicate again is going to come in handy there. I think to prong number two, tools are increasingly recognizing that the people that have the programming skills are coming up and they need to be able to use these tools as well, not because they can't do this stuff without them, but because they have an army of end users that are using these tools. So in the case of Alteryx specifically, you know, you may be responsible for the Alteryx deployment at your organization, and you might not necessarily need it to get your job done, but you're supporting however many people that are using it, and so you need to know how to use it as well. And what they've done as kind of a compromise is they've opened up all their tools so that you can actually, and they're in R specifically, which is unfortunate because I'm a Python girl, but you can actually get in there and tweak them and modify them and like do your own thing. So I think the tools are increasingly recognizing that they have to serve both audiences, the ones that want to just drop something in and run with it, and the ones that want to actually put their own mark on it and see something through that they feel like they've personally owned along the way.
So to Sam's question, in fairness to Alteryx, they do care about that, and the successful business intelligence providers increasingly care about this. They had our integration as soon as 3 or 4 years ago, and they actually just acquired a company that was founded by a UVA student that makes Python IDEs. And with that, we're kind of imagining they're going to do the same integration set with Python.
Yeah.
You mentioned communities, but honestly, outside of UVA community, I haven't interacted with any kind. How does that happen?
Yeah, it is kind of hard. And like, don't get me wrong, you will definitely join one or two that just don't work out somewhere along the way. Like I've gone to my fair share of networking events that I've sort of like grabbed my name tag and just like thrown it out and left, you know? I mean, not everyone is going to be a success. Twitter is a great way to find out what's going on. Find some people that do the things you like and follow them, and eventually things start to come up. Meetup.com is another one. It's just a place where people sort of host their communities and post their announcements. Staying in touch with the college community isn't a bad way to start either. You know, you've got a network here. Just because you finish and graduate and go on to, quote unquote, the real world, it doesn't mean you have to leave that network behind and make a whole new one. So yeah, it's a rocky road, but it eventually gets you where you need to go. Yeah.
So,
this will be the stumper question.
No. When you were in school, knowing what you know now,
Yeah.
what sorts of things might you have taken as far as courses, whatnot, that you didn't when you were actually a student?
Yeah. So if I could go back and do it over again, it definitely would have been a French minor. Definitely would have done computer science classes. If I'm being honest, when I was in college, like I didn't realize what was out there. You know, it's kind of hard. You're 18 years old and you're sort of like, the world is my oyster, but I don't know much about the world or oysters. And so, you know, I picked French because I liked it, and then I got out into the working world and I realized there were tons of other things that I liked too, and perfectly legitimate career paths there and majors that went along with them. And so I do actually hope to go back at some point and get a master's in data science or, you know, computer science of some sort. But yeah, I mean, definitely, I think make the most of your time here and learn about all the things that you like, not just the one thing that brought you here.
Can I change my question?
Yeah.
So, I don't want to give you that much freedom. So,
Okay.
suppose you were
Okay.
because what I'm sort of envisioning is we
Yeah.
have students majoring in all kinds of things here at UVA. And maybe they want to stick with French, but they'd like to sort of branch out some, but not abandon French altogether or, you know, turn it into a minor. But there's, for instance, leeway to do other things and that they have electives that they take anyway.
Yeah.
So if you were maybe to say you could squeeze in a minor along with whatever it is you're already sort of committed to, and imagine, I'm sort of thinking they want to kind of follow the path you've charted out. So they don't necessarily need to have huge amounts of technical knowledge, right? I mean, it seems like, okay.
Yeah.
So does that alter your response, or?
It does a little bit.
A little more specific.
Yeah. I think so. I've encountered a lot of people that are in sort of similar roles to mine in like an analyst role, but have journalism degrees, which is kind of interesting. I guess journalism, much like French, is a tricky degree to graduate in. And so what you have really mastered along the way is how to talk about things. And so that skill serves you well. So journalism, communication, marketing, honestly, probably not a bad thing to brush up on because a lot of data science winds up in marketing, as we all know. And so that's not going to go unappreciated. I think if I could go back specifically and stay in a French major but get a minor, I think I absolutely would have gone with something communications, PR, journalism related, just something to even build out those communication skills further. Yeah. Oh, yes.
So I have two questions.
It's not okay. One question at a time, please.
I'm going to be honest. So first question is, I guess, so being more of an independent contractor, so how do you keep up with kind of the latest technologies some of the industry, you know, and companies uses, I guess, there are online communities and like that you kind of follow and keep track of, you know?
Yeah, Twitter, again, I mean, not a bad place to start. Going to conferences, so like, I don't know how many of you are exposed to this yet or not, but like all the software companies, all the different brands, they all have a user group conference, and they do their darndest to make you feel really cool while you're there. You know, they gather 15,000 nerds and they make you think that you're like the Queen of England. And so that's one way to stay ahead, because it's not just the piece of software specifically that you're there for, but it's also all of the vendors that show up in the exhibit hall. And so that's a great way to sort of stay up to date on what's going on in the industry. Other than that, I mean, honestly, like following really nerdy publications, I still read everything from Harvard Business Review to like The Verge, you know, and just kind of staying up to date on what's happening in general. And question number 2.
So how are you incorporating, I guess, French into what you do right now? Like, is that a thing that you still kind of...
Yeah, so I actually, as much as I like to pick on myself for my career choices, I did really love majoring in French, and I love speaking it. So I read the news in French so that I don't lose it. That's kind of like my happy medium. I was in Quebec City back in the summer for a conference presenting on survey data, which is very fun. And somebody up there was kind enough to tell me that my accent wasn't that bad yet. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no
So
problem.
we'll do last question here, and then we'll stick around to talk with anyone that's interested.
Okay.
I wonder if nobody else would. Somebody else would
Sure.
jump in. Okay, so this is the last one. People ask me this question, so I'm going to pass it along to you. 'Cause
Okay.
I don't know the answer. So are the robots going to put us all out of work? Basically,
Oh.
coming back to the AI
Yeah,
question.
okay, I love this question because I am so ready for robot overlords.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like my whole job revolves around data and analytics and stuff that I'm so quickly being automated out of. You know, I can barely keep up to date, let alone stay out in front of it. You know, everything that I can do, some software piece can do for me. And I totally embrace it because the more that there's genuine, helpful stuff out there that can do my job, the more I can start to do other things. You know, so for every time the software catches up with me, which as if I'm ever out in front, but for every time it catches up with what I'm doing at my organization, that gives me a window into starting something new. And so yeah, like bring it on, AI, robots, machine learning. I am so ready to be automated out of my job. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you everyone.